It's important to start off by asking the question of why do we fight? Why do we invest in defence? It is fundamentally to protect our people, protect our interests, and of course to defend Britain. As a nation, we've never shied away from acting, even if that has meant standing alone, as we did in the darkest hours of the Second World War. Even after the Berlin Wall fell 30 years ago, when there was no overwhelmingly obvious threat to our security, we recognised that the United Kingdom had a role and responsibility to stand up for our values across the globe. Defending our values took us to Kuwait, Bosnia, Sierra Leone and Kosovo, and it made a difference to millions of people's lives. But after September the 11th, the importance of defence increased as a deadly new threat arose. A threat not just to any nation, but to all who cherish the values and the Western way of life. A global ideology seeking the destruction of everything that we hold dear. We have learnt much from fighting Al-Qaeda and Daesh. But while we tackled this extremism, state-on-state competition has been reviving. Today, Russia is resurgent, rebuilding its military arsenal and seeking to bring the independent countries of the former Soviet Union, like Georgia and Ukraine, back into its orbit. All the while, China is developing its modern military capability and its commercial power. Today, we see a world of spheres of influence and competing great powers. Not only are we confronting a state like Russia, an ideological enemy without a state like Al-Qaeda and Daesh, but the very character of warfare itself is changing. The boundaries between peace and war are becoming blurred. Our adversaries are increasingly using cyber attacks, subversion and information operations to challenge us and the rules-based international order, operating in the grey zone, operating below the threshold of conventional conflict. Our Joint Forces Command is already dealing with this, but we need to go further. We need to bring together our strategic capabilities. We need to integrate them more effectively and a greater agility to meet the demands of this increasingly contested environment. We and our allies must deter and be ready to defend ourselves, ready to show the high price of aggressive behaviour, ready to strengthen our resilience and ready, where necessary, to use hard power to support our global interests. But there is great opportunity here too. As we look at our position in the world, we should remind ourselves that we are a nation with a great inheritance, a nation that makes a difference, a nation that stands tall. Inevitably, there are those who say that we are in retreat, those who believe that as we leave the European Union, we turn our back on the world. But this could not be further from the truth. Whether people voted leave or remain, they believe that Britain must continue to play an important and major role on the international stage. It is my belief that Britain has its greatest opportunity in 50 years to redefine our role. As we leave the European Union and the world changing so rapidly, it is up to us to seize the opportunities that Brexit brings. We will build new alliances, rekindle old ones, and most importantly, make it clear that we are the country that will act when required. We should be the nation that people turn to when the world needs leadership. And defence will be pivotal in reinforcing Britain's role as an outward-looking nation. We're making sure it does so in a number of key ways. Firstly, by increasing our global presence and building on our alliances. NATO, 70 years on from its founding, remains the bedrock of our nation's defence. In the past 5 years, the alliance has come a long way. It is far more focused and ready to deter and defend against Russian hostile acts. But more European nations need to be ready and capable of responding to, stepping up to the 2% NATO target and not being distracted by the notion of an EU army. Britain must be willing and able to lead the alliance, to bring stability in a changing world. We're a leader in NATO, this year hosting the leaders' meeting here in London. Alongside this, we've sent a battle group to Estonia to support NATO's enhanced forward presence. We lead multinational maritime task groups in the Mediterranean and defend the skies over the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea. And we strongly support NATO's readiness initiative to make sure forces are available and ready to do their job. And in NATO, we must stand firm against Russia's non-compliance with the INF Treaty. If necessary, being ready to deal with the threat that new Russian missile systems may pose. The alliance must develop its ability to handle the kind of provocations that Russia is throwing at us. Such action from Russia must come at a cost. Nor can we forget those countries outside of NATO who face a day-to-day struggle with Russian attempts to undermine their very sovereignty. We stand ready to support our friends in Ukraine and the Balkans. These countries have the right to choose their own destiny and be free from Russian interference. At the same time, in such an uncertain age, like-minded nations must come together to increase their own security. That is why the United Kingdom is leading the 9-nation Joint Expeditionary Force, which in a few months' time will take part in its first deployment to the Baltics. But we must not see this as our limit. We must be willing to go further. History has taught us that crisis comes when we least expect it. As uncertainty grows, we must be ready to act, bringing others with us. Readiness has to be our new watchword. In an era of great power competition, we cannot be satisfied simply protecting our own backyard. The UK is a global power with truly global interests, a nation with the 5th biggest economy on the planet, a nation with the world's 5th biggest defence budget and the 2nd largest defence exporter. And since the new global great game will be played on a global playing field, we must be prepared to compete for our interests and our values far, far from home. That is why global Britain needs to be much more than a pithy phrase. It has to be about action, and our armed forces represent the best of global Britain in action. Taking action alongside our friends and allies, action to strengthen the hand of fragile nations and to support those who face natural disaster, action to oppose those who flout international law, action to shore up the global system of rules and standards on which our security and our prosperity depends, and action on occasion that may lead us to have to intervene alone. Now, I know there are some that question the cost of intervention, but it is often forgotten the cost of non-intervention and the fact that this has been unacceptably high. It will not always be the role of traditional Western powers to act as the global policeman, but nor can we walk on by when others are in need. To talk but fail to act risks our nation being seen as nothing more than a paper tiger. I do not underestimate the challenges that this approach brings, but we do start from a position of strength. Our people are already acting around the world, from the North Sea to the South Pacific, to protect our interests, and we already benefit from strong international partnerships. But we cannot take such relationships for granted. Our global presence must be persistent, not fitful; patient, not fickle; permanent, not fly-by-night. So, as well as our relationships with Europe, we need to build on our established relationships with the United States, Australia, New Zealand and Canada as part of the Five Eyes, with Singapore and Malaysia in the Five Powers defence arrangement, with other ASEAN nations, with Japan, the Republic of Korea and India, with our partners in the Middle East, and with our many friends in Africa, from Nigeria in the west to Kenya in the east. And we are seeking to use our global capabilities to strengthen our global presence. From this spring, HMS Montrose, along with 5 other naval vessels, will be permanently based in the Gulf, using innovative crewing and support methods to keep the ship available for more of the time. Today, we also go further, and I can announce the first operational mission of HMS Queen Elizabeth will include the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and the Pacific region, making global Britain a reality. Significantly, British and American F-35s will be embedded in the carrier's air wing, enhancing the reach and lethality of our forces, reinforcing the fact that the United States remains our very closest of partners. We share the same vision of a world shaped by individual liberty, the rule of law, and of course, the tolerance of others. We have a unique ability to integrate with US forces across a broad range of spectrums and areas, and we are more determined than ever to keep working together. We'll also be using our string of global support facilities and military bases more strategically to consistently project power, both hard and soft. The Duqm port facilities in Oman are large enough to be able to support our aircraft carriers. The Al Minhad and Al Udeid bases in the Emirates and Qatar, respectively, provide strategically important capabilities. In Bahrain, our naval base and our long-standing maritime command make a major contribution to our activities in the region, but also beyond. Further afield, we already benefit from facilities in Belize, in Brunei and Singapore, as well as our bases in Cyprus, Gibraltar and Ascension Island. And I believe that we need to go further, considering what permanent presence we might need in areas including the Caribbean and Asia Pacific to extend our global influence. Our proactive approach shows we are not getting by on half measures. For us, global engagement is not a reflex reaction to leaving the European Union. It is about a permanent presence. But having that presence goes hand in hand with our multi-million-pound transformation fund, making sure our armed forces have the right capabilities as quickly as possible. And today I can announce some of the first investments from that fund. Take the Royal Navy. They are exerting British influence through a much greater forward presence. I want to capitalise on that, investing now to develop new littoral strike ships, and if successful, we'll look to dramatically accelerate their delivery. These globally deployable multi-role vessels will be able to conduct a wide range of operations, from crisis support to warfighting. They would support our future commando force, our world-renowned Royal Marines. They'll be forward deployed at exceptionally high readiness and able to respond at a moment's notice, bringing the fight from sea to land. Our vision is for these ships to form part of 2 littoral strike groups, complete with escorts, support vessels and helicopters. One would be based east of Suez in the Indo-Pacific, and one based west of Suez in the Mediterranean, Atlantic and Baltic. And if we ever need them to, our 2 littoral strike ships, our 2 aircraft carriers, our 2 amphibious assault ships, Albion and Bulwark, and our 3 Bay-class landing ships can come together in one amphibious force. This